So I'm going to start and I'm going to say hello, and it's lovely to have everybody with us today. This webinar is part of the Near Neighbours programme. The Neighbours programme brings people together from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different faiths, in order to encourage people to work together to make their communities better places to live. So as part of that, we offer free resources on our website, free toolkits, free webinars on topics to help people with what they're doing in communities. And this is one of those. And we're going to talk today about writing better grant applications for community activities. I'll just introduce who we've got with us today. So I'm Liz and I'm the Programme Director at Near Neighbours. We've got Amy with us, who works for Near Neighbours as Partnerships Manager. We've got Nudrat with us, and Nudrat has a dual role. She works in Lancashire area as a Near Neighbours coordinator, and she also is part of the Near Neighbours grants team. And I think they'll introduce themselves a bit later on. I'm going to now hand over to Amy. She's just going to do some housekeeping about the session today and the recording of it. Over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us. As I said, my name is Amy, if we haven't met before, and I'm just going to share a little bit of housekeeping business for us this morning before we get started. So this session is being recorded, but please note that your faces won't be visible on the recording. So we'll send that recording round to you via email afterwards, and we'll also pop it on our website. So it will be there for you to access, and also you can direct others to it if they can't come along today. So Nudrat and Liz will be answering any questions that you have during today's session. So do pop them in the chat as you think of them as we go through, and we'll pick them up towards the end of the session. You should be able to see a button somewhere on your screen. It's probably on the bottom if you're on a computer or a laptop, and it might be at the top if you're on a phone or a tablet. It says chat. And if you click on that, you should be able to just type your question in there, and I'll pick them up as we go along. But you can also just ask them at the end when we get to the Q&A point. So that's it for housekeeping. And I'll hand over to Nudrat to kick us off proper.
I think I'm kicking off proper, actually.
Yes, sorry.
But Nudrat's going to do the slides. So yeah, if you want to join the chat and say who you are, where you're from, and what you'd like to learn from today, and then we can check at the end if we've covered it. So next slide, please, Nudrat. So this workshop is normally a full day of training. That's how it was first devised. And we have a really, really useful toolkit, which we've got loads of free resources on the Near Neighbours website. If you go to the resources page, we've got lots and lots of videos and toolkits and helpful guides to lots of things related to fundraising, like how to do a budget or how to do a project plan, how to do evaluation. And so today, what we're talking about today, there's a very useful toolkit that goes alongside this session, which is called Writing Grant Applications, and that's got loads more detail in than I'm covering today. This toolkit was compiled by our colleague John McCallum, and he was working in the East Midlands area for us, and sadly he's died, but because he's left us all these great tools and resources, we just name-checking John, who was a great guy. So no questions are too silly today. We realize that people who come to this workshop, this webinar, will have a vast range of different kinds of experience, some just beginning and some more advanced. Any question is not a silly question. If you've thought of it, someone else probably thought of it too. So just put it in the chat. We'll try and cover as many questions as we can at the end. Next one, please, Nudrat. So these are all the things we're covering today. Firstly, we're going to think about understanding grant makers' needs. So what are they looking for? We're going to have a step-by-step guide to grant writing. What do you need to include in your applications? Where can you find funding opportunities? And we'll give you a list of current grant opportunities or current funders that we're aware of. I'm going to send all these slides to you afterwards, so you don't need to make hundreds of notes. We will actually send this to you if you've taken part in this or you've registered. Next slide, please, Nudrat.
Right, so thank you so much, Liz. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being with us. So my name is Nudrat, as Liz mentioned, and I am the Near Neighbours coordinator in Lancashire, and I also work within the grants team at Near Neighbours, and we look at different grant applications, and hopefully some of my experience will be kind of supporting you at the end with the questions that you may have. So one of the things that the grant makers need is one of the things that we're going to look at now is going to be, why do they give grants? So why do the grant makers or the funders give the grants out? What are their strap lines? What might they fund? And 10 things that they're looking for. So why do they give grants out? To comply with the wishes of the founder, and those grants are called legacy grants. One of the examples is the Tudor Trust is money from shares in a construction company, which is called Wimpy's, from Sir Godfrey Mitchell. And some of the money that comes from that is given out in his wishes. So his money was given as a legacy, and now his wishes are being complied by giving those grants out, meeting the needs that they're interested in, and we will look at the strap lines in the next few slides. To help with the trustees feeling good, so giving back to the community. One of the examples is the Lloyd's TSB Foundation and their grants. For them to know that their money is being well spent, comply with the charity law, and the corporate social responsibility, which is also known as CSR. And CSR is efforts made by the company to improve the society. You can look at the givingmachine.co.uk, so you can just Google that to know a little bit more about CSR, or you can just Google CSR and you will have a little bit more information about what that is. So funders and their straplines. Our strapline for Near Neighbours is bringing people together. Big Lottery is people and communities. Tudor Trust, supporting positive change in society. Arts Council, make the case for arts and culture. Community Foundation is connecting people who care with local causes that matter. BBC Children in Need is helping improve children's lives in the UK. And Henry Smith Foundation is grants to reduce social and economic disadvantage. And some of these straplines give you an idea of the type of funding that these funders would give out. For example, Henry Smith, they give out few different types of grants. One example of reducing social and economic disadvantage is they fund recreational trips for groups of young children who have experienced or are experiencing disadvantage, or they have disabilities. So, what might they fund? Some funders give startup funding, which is to get your project off the ground. It's seed funding to make sure that if you don't really have any other source of funds to set a group up, or you don't really know how to apply for bigger grants, so you can go and look for something which is seed funding, something that we also give. So Near Neighbours gives seed funding to community organization to get the funding, to get the projects off the ground. Revenue funding, which is to cover any costs related to projects, such as salaries. Not every funder gives money for salaries. Core and long-term funding, which means that the trust, some of the trusts provide the kind of funding, partnership funding over a number of years. So they would give up the funding for 2 or 3 years. capital funding, which is only for the building costs, repairs of your building, refurbishment, equipment, and that is all related to your building work. Match funding means giving grants given as match funding where the rest of the project costs have been or is being sourced from other funders. So that means that you might have £5,000 already from one pot of money that you may have been given by the council, and you're now looking for another 5,000 because the overall cost of your project is 10,000. And looking at some examples of the startup funding, which is the Neighbours funding, we give really small grants out, and they can be between £500 and £4,000. The awards for all community foundations, revenue funding is Tudor Trust, Big Lottery, Garfield Weston Foundation. And core funding can be sourced from Big Lottery, Tudor Trust, or Esme Fairbairn. And capital funding could be sourced from the FCC, that's formerly known as REN, which was a local recycling company, and they give grants out to community projects that look at doing projects within the community that work with recycling or upcycling and kind of working within their own local communities. But those are given to just localities where their projects are based. So not everyone within the around the country can apply for those grants. And again, capital funding can be given by Big Lottery, Benefact Trust, and Benefact Trust only give funding out to churches or Christian projects. So if you are a mosque or a Gurudwara, or other temples or other faiths, and you're applying for the the Benefact Trust funding, then your application is going to be rejected because they have a specific type of grant and they only support specific type of communities. So I'm going to hand over to Liz now.
So 10 things that funders are looking for. Measure of success. So how are you going to evaluate and monitor what you've done and know if you've achieved it? You can look on the Near Neighbours website. We've got a lot of tools around monitoring and evaluation, how to do that well. And you need to think about that before you start, because if you're going to measure something, then you've got to measure it as soon as you start operating. So do look at the Near Neighbours website resources page for a lot of help about that. You need to have thought about a realistic budget, and we're going to come on to value for money and what does that look like. Funders will look for competence. So have you done this before? Someone else involved in the project know about this? If you're running a youth work project, for example, is there somebody who's a youth work background who's involved in this? Can you show that you've got competence in this area, or that someone involved has? Have you acknowledged potential problems or risks that might happen? You know, have you got a contingency for no one turning up? How are you going to advertise it? You know, what if there's a problem with the building? Those kind of things. Have you got a clear vision of what you want to achieve? Again, we'll come back to that. Are you flexible and adaptable? Have you got an exit strategy for when this funding ends? What will you do then? What's your follow-on? What's your legacy? Attention to detail, so don't misspell everything in the application, and make sure your budget adds up and things like that. Can you evidence the need that you're trying to meet? And again, we'll come on to that a bit later. And have you got a clear purpose? Thanks, Nudrat. So that's more or less what we're going to cover in this step-by-step guide. Thanks, Nudrat. So things you need to pay attention to: reading the guidelines and the criteria. Some small trusts, some small charities want you to write a proposal or a letter. So there's no application form. You have to write them a letter saying what you want to do, why you want to do it, how much you want. And that sounds really difficult. But again, in our toolkit on writing grant applications for projects, there is a really helpful example of the kind of letter you could write and what you need to cover in it. Others have an application form with, this is where you insert in this box your name, your charity number if you have one, what do you want to achieve, and there might be a word count limit that you can't write more than so many words. So we'll be thinking about both of those kind. You will need to write an executive summary, which again we're going to come on to. You will need to evidence the need of what you're meeting through research, statistics, stories. Again, we'll expand on this. Your clarity of purpose. Again, we're going to expand on that. Also, your financial credibility and value for money. Sustainability, so that's the legacy that we talked about. And that your application is readable, makes sense, doesn't have mistakes in it, isn't full of jargon, etc. Thanks, Nudrat. Next slide. So the 3 most important pieces of advice you'll hear today are: 1, read the grantmaker guidelines. 2, read the grantmaker guidelines again. And 3, read the grantmaker guidelines yet again. And I know this sounds silly, but you'd be surprised the number of applications that don't read them properly. There's no point applying to somebody who only funds capital costs, i.e. equipment, and you want funding for a youth worker's salary. It's just not going to happen. No point applying to somebody who only funds projects in Cumbria and you're in London. Read them carefully first, because lots of people don't, and they waste a lot of time writing applications that aren't going to go anywhere. Next slide, please. So you can find out a bit about the grant maker, apart from what's their criteria. Read their sort of background, and when you're looking at them, look at their website. What do they do? What are they about? Sometimes you can Google, if they don't have a website, you can Google them and find out a bit more. For example, if it's a small foundation, perhaps you can find out about the funder, who set it up, who left the money for the trustees to give away, what's their interests. If they're not experts on the issue that you're applying to them about, then you need to make it really easy to understand. For example, suppose you're applying to a small trust who want to sort of help people generally, and you're applying to support young people and their mental health. Then no point putting down lots of technical stuff about mental health that's too difficult for your average person to understand. Make it easy to understand why what you're doing is going to make a difference to young people's mental health, for example. Don't assume that they're experts in mental health just because you're applying to them, or any other topic. Just make it understandable, readable for anybody. When you're writing applications, give it to a friend and say, does this make sense what I've written? Because that really would help, because you might have written something and you know what you mean, but no one else does. Thanks, Nudrat. Next slide. So it is quite obvious if what you're doing is nothing to do with what the funder wants to fund, and you're just trying to fit their criteria. For example, a funder only funds projects in Cumbria and you're in London. No point saying, oh, we're going to invite 3 people from Cumbria to take part, but actually 99% of our projects in London, because that's just obvious. You've got to see what they're interested in funding and where your project overlaps. For example, it might be a funder who's interested in technology and more people understanding science and STEM subjects. Well, maybe you want to run a youth project. Maybe they would fund computers for your young people. But if you're not sure, ask them. They'd rather that than get lots of applications that are just going straight in the bin. So contact them and saying, you're interested in science, technology. We're wanting to get some computers for our young people. Is that the kind of thing you would fund? Just ask them before you bother spending 5 hours writing an application. Don't fund what you want to do, then just move on. Some foundations and trusts don't accept unsolicited applications, i.e. they actually look for the projects they want to support. So they actually themselves look for, well, here's an interesting project. We'll approach you and say, would you like to work in partnership with us? We're a funder. And they don't accept cold applications. So that should be clear on their website, whether they do or whether they don't. So if you're writing a letter, it's not an application form, but it's a letter or a proposal. These are the 5 things you definitely need to include: your name, your organization, what's the need you're trying to address, what's the issue, what you're trying to do, what impact you're trying to achieve. How much do you need? What's it for? How would the money help? How would the money actually be spent, and what difference would that make? And again, if you look on our toolkit, this is explained in much more detail, the kind of things that you need to be saying. So you need to be prepared to give different kinds of explanations of your project. You need to be able to give a very, very short aim and explanation of what you do. So have you got a mission statement for your organization? Like, you know, we want to transform the mental health of young people in Blackburn, or something like that. With below that, you'll have kind of aims and objectives. So for example, we want to provide healthy activities for young people in Blackburn. You might have, you know, we want to do 5 workshops for people in Blackburn over the age of 16 to 18-year-olds, and we'll engage them in arts activities and sport, for example. Below that, you'll have detailed budgets. You'll have who's managing these youth workers. You'll have who are the trustees of our organisation. You'll have how are we paying for the sessions that we're doing at this youth centre in Blackburn. What are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve? More healthy people in Blackburn. And then if you're applying for a lot of money, you'll have to have done quite a lot of research. So for example, if you were applying for a building renovation, perhaps you've got architects' reports. If you're doing a big project with hundreds of young people, then maybe there's some statistics that the local authority have done into the mental health of young people in Blackburn. So beneath that, there should be some more supporting detail that you can draw on or send as an appendix, or you know, addend to your application, or just refer to. You know, if you look at this website, you'll see all this evidence that's all about the mental health of young people in Blackburn. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to give you a few minutes to, because you're going to be hearing a lot of talking from us. So this is a chance for you to talk to one another. We're going to break you up into groups, and we want you to think about your elevator pitch for your project. Elevator pitch means you're in an elevator, a lift in English, and you're going down in a lift, and you've got only a couple of minutes to tell someone in that lift what your project does. So it's got to be straightforward, it's got to be understandable, it's got to be to the point. And practicing that and knowing what you say you do will really help you to sort of crystallize the nub of what it is you're doing or what you want to do. So I'm going to hand over to Amy now. She's just going to explain what we're going to do. Amy, over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to put you into breakout rooms now. There should be 2 or 3 in your breakout rooms, so nice little groups. And as Liz said, if you just go through what you think your elevator pitch would be, try to explain what you do in a few sentences, and just see if the other people in your group can really understand what your aims are and what you're trying to do. It's okay if it's hard, it's okay if it's really easy. If you do whiz through it and you find that actually you can understand really easily what the other people's projects are, then you can go on to explore how you're actually going to try and achieve those aims. So how are you going to make your project work? You can do that together. But I'll open the rooms now, and you will have, I think we'll do 9 minutes. So if you've got 2 people, you've got a little bit longer to do it together. If you've got 3, then you've got about 3 minutes each to work on it together. So I'll open those rooms now, and it will pull you back automatically when we're done. So we'll see you in a little bit. Great, thanks everyone. So how did you find doing that? Maybe you found it quite straightforward. Maybe it was a bit trickier to distill your project and everything you're doing into just a few sentences and explain that really succinctly. We'd like to know how you found it. So do put in the chat if you found it straightforward or a bit tricky. Maybe there's some more work that you want to do around perfecting your elevator pitch. Put that in the chat. And if any questions came out of that as well that you want to ask Nudrat or Liz about crafting an elevator pitch, then do pop those in the chat as well. Back to you, Liz.
Yep, so Nudrat, next slide, please. So if you're going to write an executive summary for either a proposal that doesn't have an application form, or some people want that as part of their application. Think of the 5 W's: who you are. We are the Blackburn Youth Centre. What does your organisation does, and what need is it addressing? We are working with young people in Blackburn, especially those who are disadvantaged. I'm just making this up because I'm not actually from a youth project in Blackburn, but I do live near Blackburn. Why do you do it, and what difference does it make? So, you know, we work with 500 young people a week, and, you know, here's one of our young people who's now, you know, become leader of the Girl Guide movement worldwide, and that's all down to the youth club that she was part of. Where you're based, you know, we work in Blackburn and surrounding East Lancs area. And when you started, we've been going for 10 years, and, you know, we've worked with hundreds of people since we started. So who, what, why, where, and when is a really good start. So funders are looking for a project that's continually improving. So you're researching, you're monitoring, you evaluate what you do, and that makes you improve and do better. And it doesn't mean that you've got to necessarily just think, have we worked with 10 young people? There's quality as well as quantitative research. So another way of doing research and monitoring is like an evaluation workshop, where you ask people, how do you think we're doing, and what do you think we could do better? You could be doing surveys, you know, asking young people, why do you like coming to our project? You could be counting people who come. There are lots of different ways of monitoring, evaluating. And again, look on our website, resources. We've got lots of tools about monitoring, evaluation, and how you can think about constant improvement. Raising resources. So, you know, are you fundraising from other places? Have you got lots of in-kind support? You know, the local authority are giving us free advice on XYZ. We've got this free use of a venue from this person. We've got 73 volunteers giving 20 hours a week. Where else are you looking to get funding and support for what you do? How are you putting your project into practice? How are you actually making it happen, and what's your evidence for that? Are you managing it sustainably? We've got 5 trustees, you know, and we've put our audit into the Charity Commission every year, or, you know, we're regularly audited, or whatever it is. Can you show that your thinking is visionary? Because nobody wants to fund something everybody's already doing. You know, people want to fund interesting things that are inspiring and encouraging. So can you show that you're inspiring, encouraging, and doing something really different, or something really impactful? And are you involving everybody in your planning? And what we mean by that is, no good me running a project for young people if I'm not a young person, or involving young people in the planning, or I've got 3 young people on the steering group, or I've got, you know, some way of involving and encouraging the young people in what I'm doing. So how are you involving people in the community? Next slide, please. So this is about evidencing the need, which again, funders are going to want to see. So it may be that you've got lots of statistics. You can look at the local authority, or you can look at some research that somebody's done from some university, or there might be some you know, book that someone's written that you can reference. But it maybe you've got more anecdotal kind of evidence, like pictures of young people that you've been involving in your project, or older people, whatever your project is. You've got testimonials from someone who took part. You know, I took part in this project and it's changed my life because. You've got some kind of scrapbook, you know, because sometimes you might want to send things to people, or people come and visit your project, and you can show them, you know, here's a picture of our activity last summer when we had a festival. You might have a social media account. You might be able to show them some posts on Instagram from someone referencing your project. You've got to show that there is a need and that you're meeting it and no one else is, because no point if there's already someone down the road doing the exact same thing. So evidencing the need is really important. Okay, next one. Financial. Your budget's got to add up, but more than that, it's got to look like it's value for money and it makes sense. So there are different kinds of budgets that people submit or ask for. So a full budget would cover everything in lots of details. A summary budget is just like headlines. So for example, a summary budget might say youth worker salaries, £12,000. The full budget might say, these are the, 3 workers, £50 a session for 17 weeks. Or it might say, this is the worker's salary. This is their national insurance contribution, their pension contribution. So you've got to be able to back up all your figures with detail. Full cost recovery means that the whole cost of the project is being covered. So for example, this example of this youth project in Blackburn, yes, you've got to pay for the youth worker and the venue and the activities for the young people, but what about paying for the meetings of the trustees? What about paying for the electricity of the worker and the office that they use and their phone and the rent? What about paying for the audit of the charity every year by auditors? Some funders are very happy to fund the full cost recovery. So if you can say, there's a contribution to management of 10%, some people are very happy to fund that, but others are not, and they don't really want to fund the costs of your organization, what we might call the core costs. They only really want to fund this particular project, so the youth worker's salary and these activities. So you've got to work out, what can we ask for? What would they fund? Some funders, like I've said, will not fund full cost. They'll only fund a small amount of a project or one aspect of it, or the actual delivery. And we might call that subsidized delivery. So yes, this person's going to fund this youth worker and the activities of the young people, but someone else is perhaps funding the rent of the building, or the management person, or somebody else is funding towards the trustee meetings. So sometimes you might have several different projects cross-subsidizing each other. They're all, one's generously funded, and that means that the costs of that are covered, and you can put the money for this project just to this delivery. Match funding means that some funders will say, well, we'll only fund half of it. You've got to show that the other half is funded by somebody else. So you might have to put multiple applications in for the same amount to make sure that someone covers it. Obviously, if then you do get all these successful applications in, you'll have to go back and tell them, we asked you for £2,000, but we've actually got 10 now from someone else. Can we use your £2,000 for this other thing that we'd like to do? But quite a lot of projects will ask for multiple applications, knowing that only 10% of them might be successful. Offer pending results. So maybe say, although we've not done this piece of work before, after 3 months we'll give you an update and a report on how we're doing. Some funders might say, well, we'll only give you half of the money and tell us what you've done in 6 months, and then we'll consider giving you the rest. Check out what they will and will not fund and what they've given to other groups. So, no point asking for £10,000 if the maximum grant they give is £1,000. Often they'll say, our normal grants are about £2,000, or we give up to £50,000. So make sure that you look what it's worth asking for. Nudrat. So value for money, how do you cost compare to other groups? I mean, no point saying you're going to pay for a venue that costs £1,000 if you're in Blackburn, but if you're in London, then £1,000 is perhaps what it costs to hire a big hall for a day. Are your salaries the going rate, or do they seem ridiculous? And how many people are going to benefit? I remember once we had an application to Neighbours where someone was saying they'd do a photography workshop for 5 people, and it was going to cost about, I don't know, £5,000. And essentially it was paying the person who runs the project a load of money to run it, but only 5 people were going to benefit. Well, that's a lot of money per person. So think about how many people are benefiting from the money that you're getting, and is it worth it? You can look at other charities' annual reports, and you compare your costs to other projects to make sure that it makes sense. Ask the local voluntary sector organisation in your area for some help and advice. What's the going rate for this kind of work, or for these kind of salaries? Thanks, Nudrat. You need to avoid jargon if you can, because the people reading your application won't know as much about the subject as you. So try and be consistent as well in what you're talking about. You know, are you workers, are you coordinators, are they trustees, are they directors, are they beneficiaries, or are they clients? Don't keep changing the words throughout what you're saying, because the person reading it will get confused and won't understand what you're saying. So try and be consistent in what you're saying. Try and be readable, try and be understandable. That's one drop. Be clear about what you're doing. Clarity of purpose. Think about these things. Your aim. So what is your aim? My aim might be to improve the mental health of young people in Blackburn. That might be the aim of the organisation. Next one. My objective, they're things that you can have a sort of timeline of, see if you've achieved them or not, or, you know, have things that you've got like targets to reach. So for example, it might be, we'll have 5 workshops for young people in the next 6 months, and we'll engage them all in, you know, activities around arts and sport or something. The outcome, that is the change that you want to see happen. So an outcome would be young people have better mental health, more people have healthy activities, young people in Blackburn have more confidence, young people in Blackburn are more resilient. They're outcomes, they're changes that you want to see. And an output is something that you can count, like 50 people came through the project. I don't know, we made a video, that's an output. We created we created a project out of litter and made it into a triangle, whatever it is, that's an output, something you can count. Again, go to our Neighbours website, the resources page. There's lots about what are SMART targets, what objectives are, outcomes and outputs. There's videos, there's lots of helpful documents that explain this really easily. But funders will ask, what are your outcomes? What are your outputs? So you need to know what the differences are if you're going to say what yours are. And you need to thought through all that really carefully with your trustees, with your beneficiaries, with your stakeholders, before you get to this point of writing an application. Thank you. Next one. So again, before you start running a project, you may need some policies and procedures. And certainly, you know, if you're applying for funding, you're going to need some as well. So, you know, you wouldn't start running a project with young people without having thought through what is your safeguarding policy and practice. Equal opportunities around diversity, discrimination, inclusion, data protection, GDPR, how do we keep the details of all these young people safe and secure? Health and safety, risk assessment. Again, go to your local voluntary sector organisation, VCS. They will be able to help you with some of these maybe. You can Google these kind of things. There's advice readily available from voluntary sector organisations. Just Google it and get some templates. Ask some projects near you what they do about safeguarding or what they do about data protection. Again, how much you have of this is going to depend on the size of your project and what you're actually asking for. Thanks. Next one, Nudrat. Yep, next one. So we need to, this is kind of recapping what we've said. Have you researched and justified the need? Yep. Have you involved lots of people? A project's not just something you think of in the bath on a lovely sunny day. Have you talked to the local authority? Have you talked to other youth providers? Have you talked to young people? Have you worked with people? Who are the people involved in this? Who are your stakeholders? Have you got everybody involved? And have you had meetings? Have you had workshops? Have you had community engagement meetings? Have you talked to other similar projects? How can you show that you're including everybody in what you're doing? Thanks, Nudrat. Have you got a clear vision? And have you got a very clear budget and a plan? Are you enabling people to achieve and take positive action themselves? Again, this is something that you'll see in more and more funders. They don't want to see people being done to. They want people to be engaged and people to achieve their own full, potential. Are you collaborating with us? Are you communicating with others? So, for example, we've talked to the local authority, we've talked to the newspaper, we've got the police involved. we're partners with a local health service. They'd want to see evidence of this for your particular project. And learning. Are you evaluating and learning about what you've done and constantly improving? And what will you do after you've had this funding? Can you go alongside people for as long as it takes, or is there some sort of follow-on projects, or what you intend to take from what you've done? And again, you might not know when you start out, but at the same time, you should have a plan, even if you can't follow it. I think this is back to you now, Nudrat.
Yes, thank you very much, Liz. So now that you all have a little bit of an idea of what a funder might look for in your application, and how to maybe form your application form or your summary that you might send to a funder, we're going to look at a few options of where you might be able to find some funders or the funding opportunities. So where do you start looking? So the first point should always be going to your local funders, and that would include your local CVS, which is the community voluntary sector organizations, any housing associations that might be closer to where you are, or the area of work in which you want to support the communities. City councils or the supermarkets. One of the examples would be maybe going to Morrison's and speaking with their community champions. Their community champions would be able to direct you towards any local funding that might be available, and suggest what might be the best project for you to apply. The second would be going to your regional funders, which would be different community foundations, which you can Google just to find out whether there are any in your local or regional areas. And Veolia, which is, so they only give grants towards projects that improve the community facilities and the natural environment. And their grants are only given in certain areas where their projects are based. So they won't fund anyone else. So if they're giving grants out in Blackburn, and their project isn't based in Burnley, so they wouldn't fund anyone who is making an application from Burnley, because their business isn't based in Burnley. And the third one would be looking at your national funders, which are the big funders. So that would be the National Lottery, Tudor Trust, and Esme Fairbairn. Then you can go and source some of that directory of the different funders. So again, looking at or going and speaking with your local CVS, looking at the funder's own website. So in order for you to know what Neighbours makes grants to, or when the funds are going to be open, you can keep looking at our website, but you can also sign up to one of our newsletters, in which we will share whenever a new grant opens up. And your local CVS might already have a list of funders that they've produced, or you can sign up to their newsletters, in which you may be able to find different funding opportunities, or different grant opportunities that have like a deadline coming up really soon, which you can then apply for. Looking at different charity commission websites will have different funders available, different organizations that apply for funding. Go to charity commission, do some research, and that will include some of your time, but you can compile a really, really good list by just going to the charity commission website, because all the funding opportunities that come to a charity, they then are, you then go back to the charity commission and you say, well, these are the projects that we've funded, or these are the projects that have given us funding. So going to some other organizations that do similar work to you and putting their name in the charity commission kind of search bar would give you a lot of information. Looking at different databases would also be useful. So myfundingcentral.co.uk, fundsonline.org.uk, and grantsonline.org.uk, or 360 Giving. And these are all the databases in which you will find long lists of different funders, their deadlines, what they fund, how much they fund, and when the deadlines are open. Other organizations' annual reports. So like Liz mentioned before, you may already produce annual reports for your organization. So similarly, if there is an organization that does maybe similar work or does the projects in the similar location, that in which you may be able to kind of do some other work in collaboration with them or on your own. So looking at who has funded them and compiling a list from those annual reports would also be really useful. And also looking at national networks for your activity, which would mean if you're part of a national network, suppose a women's network, so you can ask other people about any opportunities, any funding grants which may be available in the future or currently, which may fund opportunities for women's based projects. And then the final one would be using grant in your grant applications, using really good quality images. You can really say a lot with the images, because sometimes in the application forms, or if you're writing a letter to a grant making body, then you may not have enough word count to put everything into just 2 sentences. So using images to convey the kind of work that you do, the sort of demographic that you support, the activities that you've already delivered, would be able to help you showcase a lot more. So, and also making sure that the image quality is really high quality images, so that when you're sending it to a funder, they can actually see the type of work that you're using. And this also makes your application a little bit more attractive. So rather than people just having to read a lot of text, just break it down with different images. That is always really useful as well. But not every funder would accept images. So again, it comes back to doing the research, and like Liz mentioned before, looking at the criteria and really, really reading the guidelines. If a funder doesn't accept or hasn't asked for the images, then sending the images wouldn't do anything much for your application. So again, checking the guidelines would be the first step. But if they do ask for images, or if they do accept the images, then do send really good quality images. And that is it from me. So Liz, back to you.
So we've compiled some resources, as I've said, on our website, and there's things like how to do project planning, aims, objectives, outputs, outcomes, there's monitoring evaluation tools, there's lots of examples, videos, smart targets, fundraising ideas, and etc. There's loads on there, all free. Your local CVS is another really important source of information if you have one, and ask your local authority if you can't find it by Google, what is our local voluntary organisation support. It might be called Kirklees CVS, it might be called another name, they've got different names, but you should be able to find one near you. Next slide please, Nudrat. So we've compiled, and we'll be sending you all these slides afterwards, but these are all lists of funders. So some of them are for specific things, like the Arts Council is for activities to do with the arts. Heritage Fund is to do things with heritage. Some of them only fund certain things, like City Bridge Trust is London only. The Robertson Trust is only in Scotland. The Tudor Trust, and Johnny, thanks for putting that in the chat. The Tudor Trust is currently closed for applications. They've sacked all their trustees and they're revising everything that they do. So they're closed at the moment while they have a complete rethink And what they're going to fund after they've had this complete rethink, we don't know. But it's worth keeping an eye on their website to see when they've come out the other side and they start funding again. Some of these are large funders, some of these are small. Thanks to Charlotte, who added about Tesco's and Asda and so on. There's lots of other supermarkets. They were just examples, the ones that we put up, of the kind of funding. But yes, all supermarkets, the Co-op and Asda all give funding. Look, that kind of very small local funding that we were talking about. Apply to your own local shop to speak to their community champion to find out how you apply and what it is. Can you go back? You went over that a bit quick. Some of these are, very, very specific of what they fund. And I mean, the Paul Hamley Foundation, for example, is absolutely massive and huge and has got pots of money, but they only fund very, very specific things. The Benefit Trust only funds churches and Christian projects. So you need to look at what you want to fund, and you can do quite a lot on Google. If you just put funders that fund youth projects in Blackburn, something might come up. There's a lot of people with a lot of experience actually in this workshop, people I know, like Johnny and Charlotte, and Matt from the Python Club. I think we funded you through Near Neighbours, Matt. So when you come to the questions, it may be that we can ask other people for suggestions depending on what you ask us, but we're going to now, I think, go to questions and answers. Is that right, Amy?
Sounds good.
Is there another slide, Nudrat? I think there might be a few more. Yeah, these are searchable websites. Some of them charge you like, £100 a person a year. Some of them are free. So go and have a look and see. But you can put in there, projects that fund young people or projects that fund health. The Near Neighbours are open at the moment. We actually are giving out Near Neighbours grants at the moment. You can apply to us, but only if you're in an eligible area. And there's only 7 areas that we cover at the moment. If you go to the Near Neighbours website, you'll see what those areas are. But you need to apply through a Near Neighbours coordinator. They will have all the details of how to apply. We haven't got that much money and we haven't got that much time to give it out. So I'm afraid we haven't made a big song and dance about having the money at the moment, but we do actually have grants available at this moment in time at Near Neighbours. If you're in a Near Neighbours area, we're only working in 7 areas currently, which are Luton, Birmingham, East London, Lancashire, Nottingham, Leicester, and I've forgotten the last one. Sorry.
Yorkshire.
Thank you, West Yorkshire.
Okay, shall we go to questions? Yeah. Okay, so we've just had a couple come through, but if you're thinking of something now, something's popped into your head, do pop it in the chat and we'll pick it up now. So Anissa asked, would you approach a corporate CSR from cold to pitch a community project?
I'll answer this one and I'll pass over to you, Nudrat, and then perhaps other people might have, if you can answer this question, because you've got experience of corporate social funding, maybe put it in the chat. I would say it's quite hard if you don't know anybody at an organization, like you just want to apply to some solicitors and you want funding for your project. It's quite hard to sort of get through to them and say, we've got a really great project and you ought to be supporting it. But at the same time, it's worth asking, because you don't know that if at that moment in time that solicitors has just been having a meeting and saying, what can we do to help our community? I wonder if we could volunteer in some local projects. They might just be at that moment waiting for an approach from a local charity to help them. But, if you're talking about a great big, I don't know, national accountancy firm or something, then it's much easier if you actually know somebody there, or you've got a link, or you've got somebody that you can actually approach and say, look, we're thinking about this. What do you think? Nudrat, what would you say?
Yeah, I completely agree, Liz. But sometimes it might be worth just emailing the organization or the company and just sharing your work and asking if they do have anyone that they can connect with. Some of the companies do have their own foundations or they have their grants programs, and sometimes they would, guide you towards those if they can't really work with you in or like support you with the CSR. But yeah, it's like you were saying, but it's, you know, much better to ask them, much better to just maybe send a very quick email, and you'll get a very clear answer from them.
Wonderful, thank you both. Danita has said on a practical level that she really likes the samosa planning triangle that we shared. Is that something that we created at Near Neighbours, and can they share it on if they credit Near Neighbours?
Yeah, it was created by John McCallum, who I name checked at the beginning. We're trying to make all these kind of resources available and for free, because we really want people to be better equipped and to resources to be shared. So feel free to share what we've shared with you today. Yes, please credit us if it's something that's you know, important for us to be credited with. But we just really like projects to be more equipped and helped to do what they do. And so we're giving all these resources away for free.
Thanks, Liz. And then Blaise has asked, how do we effectively establish financial and project management track record for new organisations with no accounts as yet, but with experienced staff?
So if your organization is absolutely brand new and you've got no track record, then it is more difficult, because you can't give, here's our last 3 years of audited accounts. But you could say, you know, the person running the project has got this experience with this organization and look up this organization. Or you could say, you know, the person who's a trustee is coming in for this experience. You can say what the people involved have got experience of doing. In fact, that's always useful if there's a chance to say that, because it may be that, you know, you've got someone coming along to help you with loads and loads of really relevant experience and skills, and it's good to be able to say that. I mean, it will rule you out of some funding, because some funding will only fund people with, you know, audited accounts for 3 years, or that you're a registered charity, or that you're a registered company, or whatever it is. But others are much more risk-taking and will fund a group of people who've come together. And for example, Near Neighbours, we've funded people who haven't got a bank account in the past, haven't we, Nudrat? And we've said, well, you'll have to work with a local organisation who have got a bank account, who will be the, you know, the legal holders of this fund. So is there someone you could partner with who would hold the funding for you, who can show the last 2 years of audited accounts? That you could maybe work with. Nudrat, have you got any comments on that one?
Yeah, I just want to, there was a very good comment by Charlotte from Transformation Cornwall, and I just wanted to kind of share that with everyone. So another way of you making sure that you, if you don't really have a financial history, is working in partnership with somebody else. So if there is an organization that has a history, or they've been going on for a couple of years and they have done a few projects that are similar to the project that you want to do, you may want to partner with them, and that will help you, you know, the credibility would be built through that partnership, but also you can create the history of work. So you don't really, so yes, Liz, we have funded projects that didn't really have any history, but that is because we give small grants out. But if it was a bigger pot of money, then that might be a bit more difficult. So it is much easier if you're either working with somebody else, or you create a joint, a consortium of some kind, where you can apply for funding with other people, and that will help you build the history. Thank you, Amy.
Great.
Johnny put a helpful thing in the chat as well, which is, we were talking earlier about FCC, formerly Wren, which is a landfill company, and Veolia, which is a landfill company. And Johnny said there's a searchable list of landfill funders for community building or environmental projects, and he's giving you a thing which you can just put, I think you put your postcode in and it tells you where there's a local similar organisation to you. Thanks, Johnny.
Brilliant.
Right, that was actually the searchable list, and then when you go to them, each of them, you'll put your postcode in to check.
Great, thank you. And another question here from Emily. If I wanted to approach a funder prior to applying, what kind of information should I be looking to get from them? E.g., should I ask about the structure of the application, or give an elevator pitch to see if it's something they would fund?
I would say both. So because we get emails from different people. Sometimes we are sent proposals, and we don't really accept proposals for funding, because we have an application form that we would ask people to fill in and submit. But when people do send us emails and they ask us about the structure of the application, or any other questions that they might have, if the work or the area of work or the area of focus and the communities that they're working and the types of activities that they want to carry out, if that aligns with the type of funding that we give out, then we would inform them when the grants open up, because that we will keep their information in a list if they want us to. And that also helps us clarify a lot of questions that people might have. So I would say, any questions that you may have about the guidance, the criteria, but we would only be able to give that information out when the grants are either closer to being open again, or if the grants are open. So it just depends on your project, depends on the area of your work. So you can give the elevator pitch, yes, in an email, and if that aligns with the funders' criteria and the guidelines, then you will get an answer from them.
So thanks everybody for coming and your participation. I hope it was helpful and useful. We, as I say, do provide a lot of free resources, but also there's quite a lot of people who've put in the chat things that they provide and resources they're aware of. So do look at the chat before you go, because there might be something really key that you want to look at. And if you register for this webinar or our next webinar, even if you can't attend, we will send all the information afterwards. But I think, coming actually does help, because you can engage and ask questions. And I hope you found the breakout room useful as well, because you'll often find that people around you have got a lot of knowledge that you can learn from. So I would say, do talk to people in running projects around you for advice and help and support. Your VCS, someone who already runs a similar project, or somebody you know and trust who you could ask for help and advice, because you will find immense lot of knowledge and skills and experience around you. And thanks for those who came today, who got a lot of knowledge and experience and skills and shared that. We do appreciate that. Thank you all.
Liz, sorry, there is a comment by Annette, who has asked if we can share the link to the funding on our website. So we haven't really opened the grants to public, so you'll have to look at the coordinators section on our website.
Local hubs, I think it's called, isn't it?
Local hubs. And you will have to go through the page, and at the end you will find different hubs and see if there is a local hub in your area. If there is one, then there will be email addresses on each hub's page, and you can email the hub coordinator, and that's how you will get more information about the funding.
Yeah, you've got to go to your local coordinator in your area if your area is covered, haven't you? Okay, thanks all. Thanks very much for taking part, and thanks to Nudrat and Amy as well. Cheers, everyone. Thank you. Bye.